The golden chandeliers shimmered like stars above the ballroom at the Palms in Victoria Island, Lagos. Jazz music wafted from the stage, and the scent of lilies mixed with expensive perfume filled the air. It was Amanda Westwood's 27th birthday, and the room pulsed with wealth and promise. Tonight wasn't just about growing older, it was meant to mark the beginning of her forever. Amanda stood radiant in a deep sapphire satin gown, her natural curls pinned in a soft bun, a subtle gold crown on her head. On her left hand, a diamond ring gleamed her engagement to Darius Blake, Lagos's rising tech star, sealed just 6 months earlier. He stood beside her, tall, well-groomed, and calm, his arm around her waist. Amanda had waited for this kind of love, earned it. Everything finally felt like it was hers, until Darius tugged gently at her hand. "Amanda," he said, his voice too serious. "Can we talk? Just outside?" She laughed nervously. "You're not proposing again, are you?" tapping her ring. He didn't smile. Something was wrong. They stepped through the terrace doors into the cool evening, past fairy lights and blooming hibiscus. Amanda turned to him, expecting nerves maybe about the wedding. But then he spoke. "I didn't plan this, but I've met someone else." Her chest tightened. "Excuse me?" she asked, already dizzy. "It just happened. She's pregnant." Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. "Who?" Darius looked away, jaw clenched. Silence, then Danielle. Her sister, Danielle. The older, always glamorous, always praised sister who had somehow managed to make Amanda feel like an understudy in her own life. "You're having a baby with my sister?" Amanda whispered. Darius didn't deny it. He looked ashamed. Her legs weakened, but she didn't fall. She stormed back into the ballroom, fury rising. And then the doors opened again. Danielle entered, belly visible, her face smug, wearing Amanda's favorite gold earrings, the ones their late father gave her. "Surprise," she said silkily. "Darius and I are expecting. And yes, we're getting married." Silence swallowed the room. Amanda stood alone in the middle, mascara beginning to run, her mother looking away. No one said a word. So Amanda took off her heels, held her head high, and walked barefoot out of the hall away from her party, her fiancé, her family, and every lie she once called home. Amanda didn't cry that night, not even once. She got into her car, still barefoot, her dress bunched beside her like a memory she couldn't wait to forget. The highway out of Lagos stretched ahead like a question she hadn't answered yet. With each passing kilometer, the lights of Victoria Island shrank in her rearview mirror until they vanished completely. Her phone vibrated with messages. "Are you okay? What happened? Where did you go?" She switched it off. If they didn't know, they didn't deserve to. She needed space, not sympathy. By dawn, Amanda had driven past Lekki, past EPA, and straight into the coastal town of Ilashe, a place she had visited once as a girl. Back then, it was the beach she remembered. Now it felt like exile, and maybe salvation. She rented a small, weathered bungalow near the water, salt in the air, sand in the sheets, and silence in every corner. No one recognized her here. No one cared about the drama she had left behind. Amanda Westwood ceased to exist. She became simply Amanda, the woman who kept to herself, who wore oversized shirts, who painted when she couldn't sleep, who stared at the ocean and tried to feel again. She got a job at a local beach cafe run by a sharp-tongued widow named Mama Uju, who didn't bother with resumes. "You can carry tray? You can work." Amanda nodded and started the next day. She moved through the cafe like a ghost, polite, quiet, functional. The regulars began to notice her. They started calling her that fine girl with the tired eyes. One evening, after closing, Amanda stayed behind to clean up. She played old high-life music from the cafe's broken radio, humming softly as she mopped the tile floor. That's when she found the sketchbook again, the one she had packed months ago but hadn't touched since. She sat by the window, the sea breeze drifting in, and began to draw. First a wave, then a girl in a party dress walking into the ocean. Her hands moved faster than her thoughts. Page after page, she poured out everything she couldn't say. The anger, the shame, the numbness. She didn't know what she was rebuilding yet, but she knew one thing. Amanda wasn't broken. She was becoming. It was on a cloudy Tuesday, the kind that smelled like coming rain and fried plantain, when Amanda met him. The cafe was nearly empty, just two surfers arguing over who had the better ride, and an old couple quietly sipping tea. Amanda stood behind the counter, sketching a seagull in the corner of a napkin, when the bell over the door jingled. In walked a man in sandals, faded jeans, and a dark green t-shirt that clung to his frame like it had been through too many wash cycles. He looked like he belonged to the sea skin kissed by the sun, beard slightly overgrown, eyes the color of low tide. "Black coffee," he said. "No sugar." His voice was smooth but tired. Amanda didn't look up until she handed him the mug. "Thanks," he said, offering a small smile that didn't expect one in return. She nodded. He sat by the window and pulled out a sketch pad of his own. Her heart skipped slightly. People rarely drew here. This wasn't the place for quiet artists or brooding men with mystery in their eyes. She tried not to watch him, but every time she glanced over, he seemed to be drawing waves. Just like her. When he got up to leave, he walked to the counter and said, "Your gull needs more wing." He tapped the napkin. "Too stiff." Amanda blinked. "And you are?" He smiled fully this time. "David." Then he walked out, barefoot like her the night she left Lagos. That night, Amanda couldn't stop thinking about him. She stayed up sketching until 3 a.m., replaying the way he said her goal needed more wing. He didn't flirt. He didn't ask her name. He just noticed her art and left. It was disarming in the best way. The next morning, he was back. Same shirt, same order. "Not here to steal your napkin," he said casually. "I just like the quiet." Over the next few days, David became a fixture, always showing up late morning, sitting near the window, sometimes sketching, sometimes reading. He never asked questions. He never pried. And somehow that made Amanda want to talk to him more than anyone else in years. It started with glances, then jokes, then small, careful conversations. Amanda found herself looking forward to David's visits. He had a way of making the air around him feel easier to breathe. They sat on the cafe porch one evening, after close, sipping ginger tea while watching the sun drown slowly into the ocean. "You're not from here," she said. "Neither are you," he replied. She smiled, then paused. "What are you running from?" David shrugged. "Maybe I'm not running. Maybe I'm just retreating." Amanda didn't push. She understood the language of escape far too well. He nodded toward her sketchbook. "You draw like someone trying to heal." She looked away. "I draw like someone who lost everything." Their talks deepened over weeks' books, favorite foods, childhood stories. David was surprisingly quiet about his past, and Amanda didn't volunteer hers either. They were both ghosts in a town that didn't ask too many questions. But one foggy morning, while Amanda was painting a stormy shoreline behind the cafe, a group of men arrived in sleek black SUVs. Amanda froze as she watched two photographers step out with long lens cameras. She followed their lenses and saw David across the road, head bowed, hoodie up. But it was too late. One of the men pointed directly at him. David ducked into a narrow alley behind the shops, and Amanda followed, heart thudding. She found him crouched behind a stack of crates, breathing hard. "Who are they?" she asked. David looked up, defeated. "They found me." "Who?" Amanda asked again. He stood up, dusting his jeans. "My name's not just David," he said. "It's David Itomi, as in Itomi Motors." Amanda blinked, stunned. She had heard of the Itomi family owners of one of Nigeria's biggest car manufacturing empires. Her mouth open. "You're him?" David nodded, eyes heavy. "I left that life behind. I just wanted to be normal for once. But it doesn't let go that easily." Amanda stared at him, her pulse racing. She didn't know whether to walk away or lean closer. Amanda stood in stunned silence. She had imagined many things about David, maybe a lost artist, a heartbroken traveler, but not this. Not a billionaire in disguise. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but sharp. "You lied to me." David looked at her, regret flickering across his face. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. That's a lie of omission, she replied. The kind that changes things. He stepped forward, hands raised slightly. Amanda, you don't understand what it's like being chased for what you have, not who you are. What we had, it felt real. And I didn't want to ruin that by dropping my last name on day one. She folded her arms, her eyes never leaving his. You sound like Darius. David flinched. The name hit the space between them like a slap. Amanda didn't explain. She didn't need to. The last man who kept secrets from me tore my world apart, she said softly. So forgive me if I'm not eager to entertain another. For a long moment they stood there, the surf crashing behind them, the tension between past wounds and present truths curling tight like a fist. David finally spoke. You've seen the worst side of trust. I get it, but I'm not asking you forget. I'm asking you not to run this time. Amanda turned away, the salt wind brushing her face. I need time, she whispered, and she walked off, leaving him behind, like the tide pulling away from the shore. That night, Amanda couldn't sleep. Her sketch pad remained closed on the nightstand. She lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, thinking about truth, how easily it bends, how violently it breaks, and yet David hadn't asked for forgiveness. He had simply told her the truth. She wondered if that counted for something. By morning, a package arrived at the cafe with her initials written on the front. AW inside was a painting, her stormy shoreline redrawn with brighter tones and steadier lines. And a note, even a lie by silence can be righted by truth spoken out loud. I'm still here, David. Amanda touched the painting with trembling fingers. For the first time in years, her heart didn't feel broken. It felt undecided. 3 days passed. Amanda didn't see David, but his painting stayed on her wall, hung above her reading chair like a question she wasn't ready to answer. On the fourth morning, she walked to the edge of the beach at sunrise barefoot, hair loose, the same way she had left that ballroom years ago. Only now she was different. She was still healing, still unsure, but she wasn't broken anymore. She sat on the cool sand, watching the waves roll in, wondering how to move forward without losing herself again. She didn't expect him to show up, but he did. David approached slowly, barefoot too, holding a flask of hot coffee in one hand and a small folded sketch in the other. May I sit? He asked. Amanda didn't reply. She simply nodded. They sat in silence for a few moments, sipping coffee, the morning light soft against their skin. I was born into noise, David said quietly. Paparazzi, boardrooms, fake friends. Everything I had felt like it belonged to someone else. But this, he gestured toward the ocean, this feels real. You feel real. Amanda looked at him. So why didn't you trust me with the truth? David sighed. Because the last person I told used me for what I could offer. I needed to know I was enough without the name. Amanda turned his words over in her mind. She had lost everything because of secrets, and yet here was a man who had everything and had chosen to walk away from it to find something real. Maybe that meant something. She reached for the sketch in his hand. It was of her sitting just like she was now, gazing at the waves. No makeup, no mask. Just Amanda. Her breath caught. You see me, she whispered. David nodded. And I want to keep seeing you truthfully this time. No lies. No performances. Amanda didn't smile, but she didn't turn away either. She let the moment sit between them, soft and unfinished. A maybe. A beginning. Amanda hadn't thought about Lagos in months. Not her mother. Not Danielle. Not the world she had walked out of barefoot, stripped of dignity and love. But all of that came rushing back with a single message on a quiet Sunday afternoon. She was sorting through unread emails when she saw it. An invitation, formal, cold, polished. Miss Amanda Westwood is cordially invited to a private dinner in celebration of Danielle Westwood's 35th birthday. Belmont residence, formal attire, no cameras. No apology, no handwritten note. Just her name on crisp digital paper and the sting of memory behind her eyes. She stared at the screen for hours, The Amanda who left Lagos would have deleted it, but the woman she had become, she wasn't afraid anymore. She printed the invitation and pinned it above her work table. David noticed it that evening when he came by with fresh pastries from the market. "You don't have to go," he said gently. Amanda didn't reply immediately. She was painting a faceless woman holding a mirror made of fire. "I'm not going for her," she said finally. "I'm going for me." David stepped beside her, resting a hand lightly on her back. "Then I'll be right there with you." She smiled, but only slightly. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. When Amanda arrived at the Belmont, heads turned. She wore a floor-length emerald green gown with a high slit and bold shoulders. Her hair swept up like a queen who needed no crown. David walked beside her in a crisp black suit, calm and unreadable. The moment they entered the candlelit hall, silence swept through the room like a wind. Danielle stood near the cake, frozen mid-laugh, her champagne flute trembling slightly. Amanda paused, locking eyes with her sister for the first time in 3 years. "You came," Danielle said. Unsure, almost defensive. Amanda's voice was smooth. "You invited me." Then she took a seat at the table, her presence loud without a word spoken. The reckoning had begun. The dining room at the Belmont was drenched in quiet tension. Crystal glasses clinked too gently. Laughter sounded too forced. Conversations faltered like weak candle flames. Amanda sat tall at the far end of the long mahogany table, the Lagos skyline glittering behind her like a stage set. Danielle looked flawless, of course she did. Her hair slicked back into a perfect chignon, her silver dress hugging a body sculpted for public approval. She played the hostess well, moving from guest to guest with her daughter in tow, a quiet little girl who resembled Amanda far more than Danielle. But Amanda didn't look at the child. Not yet. There was an unspoken rule at the table. Pretend nothing had happened. Pretend Amanda hadn't once been betrayed in this very circle. But Amanda had no intention of following rules made to protect liars. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the marble floor like a gavel. Glasses paused midair. Forks hovered. Danielle froze, her back stiffening. Amanda lifted her glass and spoke not loudly, but with the kind of clarity that made people listen. 3 years ago, she began, I was engaged. It was my 27th birthday. I was supposed to start a new chapter that night. Instead, someone I loved lied to me, and someone I trusted, my sister, announced she was pregnant with the man I was meant to marry. Gasps rippled down the table like dominoes. Amanda turned her gaze to Danielle, who stared at her with a face that couldn't hold its mask any longer. You made a show of your betrayal, Amanda continued. And the rest of you? Her eyes swept the room. You let me walk away like I was the shame to hide. Not one of you called. Not one of you followed me. You buried the truth with a smile and silence. Danielle looked down. Their mother, seated near the middle, shifted uncomfortably. Amanda's voice softened, but it only made the impact sharper. Tonight I came not to punish, but to remind you I survived you. I healed without you, and I don't need your seat at this table anymore. I brought my own. The room was still. Not the kind of quiet that comes with peace, but the kind that follows a lightning strike. Amanda sat down again, her breath steady, her hands folded. Danielle stared at her plate, her chest rising and falling like she was trying not to shatter. Their mother, Amanda Westwood, still poised in her ivory lace dress, still draped in pearls, finally broke the silence. Amanda, she said, her voice carefully measured, this is neither the time nor the place. It's exactly the place, Amanda cut in, calm but firm. This is the same kind of table you let me be humiliated at, the same kind of room you chose silence in. Regina flinched just slightly. Danielle stood slowly, removing her birthday tiara like it had suddenly become too heavy. Her lips trembled. I was jealous, she said softly. Always have been. You didn't even try, Amanda. People loved you. Dad adored you. I had to fight for attention. I wanted something that was yours not because I loved Darius, but because I wanted to feel what it was like to win for once. Amanda's face didn't move, but her eyes shone. You didn't win, she said. You stole, and you never even looked back to see the wreckage. Danielle nodded, tears streaming now. Her mask crumbled. I did, every day, and I stayed with him for a year after he left you. But he left me too. I raised our daughter alone, and not a day goes by that I don't wonder if she'll grow up seeing through me the way you do. Amanda's voice cracked just barely. I forgive you, she said, but not for you, for me. And I need you to understand something. Forgiveness is not an invitation back into my life. Regina stood next. Amanda, she whispered, you were always strong. I thought you didn't need me to take your side, but I failed you. As a mother. Amanda nodded, holding back the grief that had once made her silent. Yes, you did, and I forgive you too. But I'm not coming back, not to this family, not to this kind of love. She stood and turned to the child, Danielle's daughter, who watched the moment with wide, innocent eyes. Amanda crouched and gently said, I hope you grow up knowing you never have to beg for space at your own table. Then, without another word, she took David's hand and walked out of the hall, leaving behind not destruction, but truth. The Lagos night was cool as Amanda stepped out of the Belmont house, her heels echoing softly on the marble steps. David was right beside her, silent but sure, his hand on the small of her back. She didn't speak, didn't cry, she simply breathed, the kind of breath that tastes like freedom. Behind them, the hall still buzzed with murmurs and aftermath, but Amanda didn't turn around. She had said what she needed to say, not for revenge, not to be applauded, but because the truth had been silenced too long, and now it was free. They drove in silence to their hotel in Ikoyi. Amanda removed her jewelry slowly, her hands steady. David watched her from across the room. How do you feel? He asked. She looked up at him in the mirror. Like I finally let go of something I didn't even realize I was still holding. He smiled and walked over, wrapping his arms around her waist. You didn't just survive, Amanda. You rose. She leaned into him, eyes closed, letting the weight of years dissolve into quiet. The next morning, they boarded a flight back to Ilashe. Amanda didn't text Danielle. She didn't call her mother. Closure had already been given, clear, clean, and final. It wasn't a door left ajar. It was a locked chapter, written in full. 6 months later, Amanda opened Iba Gallery, her coastal art studio and sanctuary, named after the Yoruba word for beauty. The space was filled with paintings of stormy seas, cracked mirrors, faceless sisters, and barefoot women walking into waves. Young girls visited the gallery weekly for workshops. Teenagers wrote notes to their future selves and tucked them into shells. And Amanda? She painted. She loved. She lived. David never asked her to shrink, and she never had to perform love again. On her 30th birthday, she stood on the beach barefoot, a letter in hand addressed to the woman she once was. They tried to break you, but all they did was light the match you needed to become fire. She placed it in a bottle and watched it drift into the ocean. And for the first time, Amanda didn't just feel healed, she felt whole. What do you think about Amanda's journey? Her betrayal, healing, and ultimate triumph. Would you have handled things differently if you were in her shoes? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs a little reminder of their worth. More powerful, real-life inspired stories are coming your way. Don't miss them.